Caligula Effect Overdose is a Japanese RPG that oftentimes gets compared to Persona, and seeing some of the people behind this game and who made it, those comparisons aren't hard to see. We'll talk more about this in depth later on in the review, but it is worth noting. First released on the PlayStation Vita under the name The Caligula Effect, it would be later re-released on the PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC with the subtitle Overdose. Overdose would haul a lot of the UI, give us 2 brand new characters, the option to play as a female protagonist, entire new route where we got to play as the villains, the ostinato musicians. The story was penned by Tadashi Satomi, who was most famous for his work on the first 3 Persona games, Persona 1 and 2, Eternal Punishment, Innocent Sin. While being compared to Persona, that statement isn't wrong. It feels more of a spiritual successor to Persona 2, with some of the modern elements from other Persona games brought in. I've got quite a bit to say about this game. A lot, some bad, some good. It's left me quite mixed, but I am excited to talk about it because it is an interesting game that I think deserves more eyes than what is on it. So sit back, relax, subscribe to the channel, and let's find out if the Caligula Effect Overdose is worth picking up. The Caligula Effect is a rather interesting concept for its story. It takes the typical J-pop idol trope seen in many Japanese media and turns it on its head. You play as an unnamed protagonist, either male or female depending on what you choose. During the graduation speech, your character sees a few of their classmates wearing mysterious masks. Afraid of what they're witnessing, they run outside the door and run into the pop idol Yu. We quickly learn we are stuck in a utopia created by Yu called Mobius, where people can live and escape their emotional pains in real life. You meet up with the Go Home Club, a group of students hell-bent on finding a way to get out of Mobius and get back to the real world. Along the way, you will meet up with a group called the Ostinato Musicians, who wants to keep them and everyone else in the world of Mobius. The Ostinato Musicians create the music heard inside the world of Mobius, and Yu sings it. Yu is a virtual doll, basically like Hatsune Miku, which the creator said was a big inspiration for her design. While the Caligula Effect's cast isn't one I'm going to remember years down the road, each character has motives to why they have reasons they want to leave Mobius. There are characters you are outright going to hate, good guys and bad guys. Their flaws are ever present and sometimes they are not pleasant to deal with. This is why this game is an absolute must in terms of completing every character's scenario. It's also best not to judge the characters right off the bat. Even some of the characters whom I hated had clear motives to act the way they did. The Caligula Effect Overdose is a tried and true example of why I will always beat a game before I even start the recording process of my reviews. Context is everything, and I feel if you're going to do a review justice, even if you're not talking about any spoilers or major plot details, you need to have experience of a game's story to its fullest, because oftentimes, much like the characters in the game, the perspective you get from completing it can help shape an entirely different image than you initially had prior to the new details or information. I'm not saying everyone should or needs to beat a game in its entirety before they can cast judgment on it, or whether or not a game is worth finishing, but as someone who reviews games, it's something I will always do, even if it means missing a review deadline or missing out on potential views, because I feel it's fair to represent the game fairly and not by preconceived misconception when things have not come into full context. Rant out of the way, the first few hours of the game don't have a lot of story details or character interactions. It's not until the end of the Kagi P scenario, the first dungeon, these characters get a little bit of time to develop and become more than just battle stand-ins. I always like when a game starts off just a bit slower to develop their characters before jumping into the first main scenario, but that's just me. As the game progresses, more characters will join your party. The game gives you time to learn a little bit more about these characters and their motivations. It really seems many of the characters are just hit and miss. There are characters I hate even after completing their character scenarios, but seeing how their character scenarios played out and what drove them to become the way that they were, I hate them less than I did before. You'll also get an option to play as the Ostinato Musicians and fight alongside the villains, On top of all this, you'll have bonding moments with the Ostinata musicians as well. I kind of felt bad betraying the friends who so willingly accepted me into their club and made me their leader, but it's these moments I loved the most. The villains are so over the top in their flaws, and it makes some of the funniest moments in the game. This is a feature I really hope the sequel does better and runs with. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of this game is its unique take on the turn-based formula. Combat feels very overwhelming at first, as there are many moving parts and variables to consider before your battle even starts. Like, is the enemy a range type or a melee type? Do they have a shield? Depending on the situation, you're going to want to adjust your party accordingly before battle. Other characters will be able to follow up for more damage with moves that either hit an airborne enemy or a grounded enemy. Some party members will be able to heal, buff, and debuff your enemies. Other characters are tacticians of sorts looking for that right opportune moment to strike. Some battles may call for a focus on brute strength alone or require a bit more of defense. Coming from the developers who have worked on Shin Megami Tensei games, their knowledge of how to play with battles and spice up combat really shines. The battle system can be very overwhelming, but I'd recommend once you get the hang of the combat system to up the difficulty to at least hard to make the game much more fun, as it can feel just far too easy on normal. Really, normal's too easy. You can blow through most of the battles, including some of the harder boss battles, or what's supposed to be the harder boss battles, without even really trying. Just by simply tapping A and letting your character execute their attacks, they're going to blow through most of the enemies anyways, which renders the battle system kinda pointless if you ask me. If you want a true challenge, play this game on hard. The fact that there's even a difficulty below normal being easy on there really leaves me wondering why the developers put this in there in the first place. But if you want to experience this game the way it's supposed to be played, with the difficulty from the battle system the way the developers intended it, do yourself a favor and put the game on hard. You will thank me later. Let's break down the battle system as I walk you through a combat scenario in real time. Alright, so here's kind of a live walkthrough for the battle and how the battle system in the Caligula Effect works. So first off, you have different skills that are going to do different effects to enemies. Your goal is to basically launch the enemy into the air or down them in whatever ways possible so your characters can deal maximum amount of damage. So say for instance this enemy, right? We're going to see what this move is going to do. So that's not going to do anything. So let's go ahead and have our main character here, Hero, which was what we named him. We're going to have him use the it's called Disruption Trigger. So that's going to break the enemy. That right there is what we want. We want the enemy to be shot up into the air to deal maximum damage. Now, if we were to... let's try and use dual trigger and see what happens here. Okay, so that guy, we're good. He's not going to touch us. However, we can't say the same about this guy over here. So let's go ahead and continue to use the dual trigger there, and we will play this out. Let's use rapid trigger on this guy as well. Now, let's, for her, I think I want her to... you know what, let's use her special, and we're going to take out this guy right here. There's a reason I want to take him out and get him out of the way, so hopefully let's see how this plays out. What we're really trying to avoid here is to make sure our characters do not get their attacks interrupted. Yeah, let's do that. Use her subtle lancer here. And we'll use the subtle lancer one more time. Now, I want you guys to pay attention to something right above here. So that percentage is how highly or how likely this is willing to play out, right? The idea behind it. So he's going to have a 59% chance of knocking that guy into the air. We don't really need to worry too much about that since Susanna's special is going to take him out for us. So what I'm going to do Instead, I'm going to put Kotaro clear out here into his Gatling combo out here. Changing your strategy in battle, kind of watching how it plays out on this meter and what's going to happen, is going to give you an idea really of what you need to do.
Actually,
that's kind of what makes the battle
him,
system
so let's use Haymaker.
Kind of fun to experiment
Haymaker
with.
out right here. That'd be perfect. And let's go Haymaker one more time. So, we've got all of our characters set up except for Shogo. Let's move on to Shogo, and I'll show you how this works out. Now, the next thing we're going to do with Shogo here, so we've got this guy launched up in the air. We're going to use Gunslinger to keep him up into the air and basically juggle him. So we're going to use that, and then we're going to let it play out and see what happens.
Just want to quickly mention here, the move that Suzuna is using right now is a move that is available to all characters. They each have their own unique specialty, or really kind of super attack, if you will.
There we go.
That allows them to
That is how the battle system in the
deal
Caligula Effect
additional
works.
damage. I do, however, feel there are far too many characters across the Go Home Club and the Ostinato Musicians to keep track of. All of the characters have unique abilities and strategies to use in battle, and it is extremely overwhelming to keep track of what they all do. This game would have benefited much more from a smaller cast across the spectrum and found other uses for characters rather than just trying to find a way to fit them in to battle. Going something along the lines of maybe giving them different assignments, such as being able to buy healing items or something like that. The game doesn't really have healing items, but you get what I mean. It's all a bit overwhelming to keep track of all of these characters and what they can do in battle. Outside of battle is a bit of a mixed bag for me. The Caligula Effect often gets called a Persona clone because of its social aspects. This is half true, sort of, but it's also not the focus of the game. I'd say a game series like Artanelico has much more in common with Persona than the Caligula Effect does. Still, though, there are enough similarities for people to draw comparisons to. These moments happen pretty much after every battle scenario or dungeon. They feel more like they did in the Cold Steel games rather than Persona. Just keep your expectations in check and don't expect a major focus on social events or the levels of quality we've come to expect from a Persona game, as combat is the clear focus of this game. During certain times, you'll see an upside down triangle with an exclamation mark above your character's head. This indicates that you can talk to the character to increase your bond with them. This will lead you to a series of choices in how you must respond in order to progress the bond. You can botch a bond entirely. I ran into this with a couple of times during the Ostinato Musicians scenario, as well as with the Go Home Club as well. When I first initiated the bond, I picked the wrong answer and completely locked me out of even starting it. I simply reloaded my file and redid it, as these events do need to be completed with both the Go Home Club and the Ostinato Musicians in order to get the true ending. There is also a way to undo them if you forget to save your game after it, but it does cost 50 skill points in order to do so, so do with that what you will. This is why saving beforehand is a must. So side quests exist in this game, and I have to ask why. You'll quickly realize that every student can be talked to and starts out at level 0. By talking to them 3 times, you'll be able to increase their affinity level to 3 and become friends. Once you are friends, you'll be able to take on requests for them. This allows you to put them into your party. Once in your party, you are able to fulfill their request. This may be equipping a certain accessory to them and fighting a battle, or talking to another class member, or finding a specific item laying about. This is weird. First off, having these characters join your party has no real benefit aside from completing requests. On one hand, it's a really cool mechanic I don't see many games do.
and it's kind of a cool way to help somebody through their problems without making it feel like you're just observing them working through it themselves or using dialogue options to help them through it. On the other hand, though, it feels like a needless step and prolongs the pacing of the request. It also doesn't help they often feel weaker than the party members you have in the Go Home Club, leaving battles to feel far more tedious than they need to. They often have just a few attacks to choose from, and that's about it. Then you have to contend with, okay, what abilities do they have and how do I use them against the enemy? I like the concept, but I feel it would have been better had they just decided to cut out 3/4 of these requests and made existing ones more interesting. There were a couple of requests which had me hunt down a classmate of the same personality, a boy and a girl. I'd hunted down the girl first, put her in my party, and found the other classmate with the same personality, maxing her out. However, it only maxed her out and not the boy, even though they were both required to complete the quest, so I had to hunt him down, find her again, and complete it a second time just to max his out as well. It seemed a bit silly and unnecessary to complete the same request twice just to get both individuals maxed out. This aside, I got pretty bored with side quests as the UI and navigating the menu was very confusing and really killed the experience for me. Speaking of the menu, the casualty links list is also extremely confusing and really annoying to navigate. This is probably the biggest complaint I have about the game. As far as I could figure out, there was no rhyme or reason to the way this was set up. The UI of this menu is atrocious. Whenever it came down to finding a side quest I wanted to complete, I would go into the wire, pull up the name from there, taking me to where they were on the casualty link, clicking on their profile that way. It's also worth noting that certain characters have locks and can't be talked to until you talk to the people adjacent to them on the casualty link. This was another reason they could have cut the request in half, at least, and made it much more organized, because this menu, man, was absolutely confusing and it didn't need to be. The soundtrack works for what it is. It's used in interesting ways. At first, I was taken aback how the game didn't have a battle theme or a boss theme. Instead, it seamlessly switches from instrumental tracks to vocal tracks, and there is an in-game reason for this. Since Mobius is a paradise created by you, it really plays into that pop idol worship and uses diegetic music very effectively. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term diegetic music, this is music that you hear as the player and the characters are hearing as well. Each ostinato musician has a song they have specifically made for you to sing. The instrumental tracks will play when you are outside of battle, but every time you enter battle, it will switch to the vocal tracks. However, the tunes aren't particularly memorable in my opinion and are just pretty generic J-pop songs. It's still a really unique concept, and I'd love to see the sequel build upon these ideas. In conclusion, I think it's an alright game. If you've got the patience and you're willing to play the game past normal difficulty, you're going to find a battle system very unique that will offer up a lot of strategy. If you're looking for a game to fulfill that social simulation itch, you're not going to find it here. Though those moments do exist, they're not the central focus, and romance options are non-existent. If you're looking for a grand story with amazing writing and a memorable cast of characters, you won't find that here either. But what you will find is a serviceable plot with characters that do get the job done. There are elements of its story I like, and same goes for its characters, but they won't stick with you as memorable characters years down the road. The battle system is where this game truly shines, and in my opinion, it's what I'm looking forward to most experiencing in the sequel. I'm not going to give this game my Gaming with Spoon seal of approval, but I will also recommend you try it. This game isn't going to be for everybody, but there is an audience for this game who is going to enjoy what it has to offer. The fact that so many were already stating that the reviews for this game were too harsh on it goes to show this game has qualities people will like. Either way, with the sequel dropping in a couple months, I'm curious to see how it builds upon this game's concepts and improves upon them. Hopefully it takes the concepts this game introduced and finds ways to refine them, making a much more well-rounded experience. I'd also love to see what an English cast could do bring these characters to life in the sequel, if NIS America chooses when localizing to hire an English voice cast.
Overall, I felt this was a pretty good game. Not something I can recommend to everybody, but if you are curious about it, it is worth checking out. It is a game I would recommend more waiting for a sell, but I do hope the sequel takes a look at these ideas and builds upon them to make a much more satisfactory game. I'm looking forward to its sequel, which releases here in a couple of months. That being said, next up on the channel, the big two projects we are going to start focusing on review-wise, we're going to start making a push towards getting our Halloween stuff ready. We're going to be taking a look at Galarian's and Galarian's Ash, and you can expect a couple of other smaller reviews to pop up before then. That being said, if you haven't done so already, hit subscribe, ring the bell notification so you don't miss my next review when it goes live, as well as the other videos we will be putting out on the channel. If you found this review helpful or liked it, give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, and most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out.